Millionaire invites Black Maid's son to play chess as a joke. She didn't know he was a child genius. Come here, boy. Show me how you play chess in the slums. The words hit harder than the clink of the wine glass she set down. Every guest in the glittering Beverly Hills mansion went silent. Carmen Santos froze near the buffet table, her hands still clutching a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She didn't need to turn around to know who had spoken. That voice, dripping with arrogance, could only belong to Mrs. Victoria Whitman, the millionaire hosting the charity gala that was supposed to be about helping underprivileged kids. Now, she was mocking one, the boy she'd just humiliated. Diego, Carmen's 17-year-old son, stood motionless, eyes lowered, the silver tray trembling slightly in his brown hands. He wasn't supposed to be there tonight. He was just helping his mother, wiping tables, serving food. But in a single cruel sentence, he had become the night's entertainment. Victoria leaned back on her velvet couch, a half-smile curling on her lips. Her voice echoed through the grand hall, playful yet poisonous. Don't be shy. I'm sure you've seen a chessboard before. Or do you only play checkers in the streets? Laughter spread like a virus. Polite, shallow, cruel. The kind of laughter that told you the whole room was guilty, but no one would stop it. Carmen's heart cracked. Please, ma'am. He's just a boy. He doesn't— Victoria waved a manicured hand. Relax, Carmen. I'm giving him an opportunity. Isn't that what you people always ask for? Something flickered in Diego's eyes. Pain first, then pride. He took one step forward, then another, setting the tray down gently. The laughter faded. Where's the board? He asked quietly. A few guests exchanged looks, curiosity mixing with discomfort. Victoria smirked. Right here. She gestured toward an ornate Italian chess set on the marble coffee table. Let's see if you can even remember how the pieces move, Carmen whispered sharply. Diego, no. But he had already pulled out a chair. He wasn't thinking about humiliation anymore. He was thinking about proving her wrong. As he sat down across from Victoria, the lights above glinted off the golden edges of the chessboard, like a stage, waiting for the first act of something bigger than either of them knew. Victoria smiled confidently and made her first move. Pawn to e4, she said, sipping her wine. Let's see what the help can do. Diego studied the board, then her, and smiled faintly. It wasn't arrogance. It was quiet fire. Careful, ma'am, he said softly. Some of us learn faster when we're not supposed to. The air shifted. The laughter died. The game had begun. Perfect. Bhai, ab scene garam hone wala hai. Ye part 2 hai, tension. Emotion, or Diego ka hidden genius pehla dafa chamkega. Tone, cinematic, plus emotional, plus human touch. The room had changed. The laughter was gone. Now there was only silence, the kind that watches, judges, and waits to see if you'll fall. Victoria Whitman crossed her legs elegantly, her diamond bracelet catching the light. She looked like a queen who had already won. Your move, boy, she said, her voice sugar-coated with arrogance. Diego studied the board. To him, chess wasn't a game. It was a story. One where every piece had a dream, a fear, a purpose. The pawns weren't weak. They were survivors. The king wasn't powerful. He was protected. He'd learned that in the tiny community center back in South L.A., where broken kids played chess to forget hunger. He reached out and moved his pawn. Not randomly, but with the calm of someone who knew exactly where this would end. Pawn to e5, he said quietly. Victoria tilted her head. Ah, how bold. You think you're my equal already? I don't think, Diego said. I just play, the crowd chuckled nervously. They weren't sure if it was courage or stupidity. Only one person didn't laugh. Carmen. She stood near the edge of the crowd, her hands clasped tightly, her lips moving in silent prayer. Victoria made her next move with flair, exaggerating every motion. Knight to f3, she said. Don't worry, I'll go easy on you. Please don't, Diego replied softly. The line hit her, unexpected, sharp, and strangely calm. It wasn't disrespect. It was dignity. And somehow that irritated her more than any insult could. Move after move, the pieces clicked like tiny echoes of fate. One by one, Victoria's pawns began to fall. The guests leaned in closer, whispering, "Wait, did he just? That's the Sicilian defense, isn't it? No, that's something else." The murmurs grew louder. Victoria's smile began to stiffen. "Are you trying to make a fool of me?" she asked, her voice losing its charm. Diego looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time. "No, ma'am," he said. "You're doing that yourself." A collective gasp rippled across the room. Someone coughed. Another guest whispered, "Is he actually winning?" Victoria's face tightened. "You think you're clever, don't you?" Diego calmly moved his bishop. "No, ma'am. My mother says cleverness is nothing without kindness." Then he looked at her, and his next words silenced the room completely. "Maybe that's the piece you've been missing." Victoria froze. For just a second, her hand hesitated above the board. Her perfect smile faltered. Carmen pressed a hand to her heart. Tears welled in her eyes. Pride and fear tangled together. For the first time that night, Victoria didn't look like a queen. She looked like a woman being cornered, not by a boy from the slums, but by her own reflection. The game wasn't over, but the balance had shifted, and everyone in that glittering room could feel it. The sound of chess pieces striking the board echoed like gunshots in the silent room. No music, no laughter, just that cold, sharp click every time Diego made a move. Victoria Whitman, the queen of Beverly Hills' social circle, was losing control of her own game. She didn't understand how. This boy, this Maid's son, was sitting across from her like he belonged there. No nervous hands, no sweating, just focus, calm. That calmness infuriated her. "So tell me, Diego," she said with a tight smile, "where did you learn to play like that?" "YouTube?" Diego shrugged. "A volunteer teacher at the youth center. He said chess teaches you how people think, especially when they underestimate you." A few guests chuckled quietly. Not at him this time, but with him. Victoria noticed, and her smile faltered. She moved her rook too quickly. A desperate move. Diego's eyes flicked down, calculating. He leaned forward slightly, whispering, "You left your queen unguarded." Victoria froze. "What?" Diego moved his knight. "Her queen, gone." Gasps filled the air. Someone actually clapped before quickly stopping. Victoria's face turned pale. "You little—" She caught herself, forcing a laugh. Beginner's luck. But the laughter didn't come back this time. The guests were watching differently now. The arrogance in their smiles had melted into fascination. Carmen stood in the corner, holding back tears. She wanted to tell her son to stop, to apologize, to end this. But she couldn't. For the first time, she wasn't seeing her boy serving trays. She was seeing the man he was becoming. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "You think this means anything? Winning a game?" Diego looked up, his tone still gentle. "No, ma'am. But sometimes the game shows who we really are." The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. Even the servants had stopped moving. Victoria made another move, reckless, panicked. Diego countered instantly. Her last line of defense crumbled. Only her king remained. Trapped. He didn't say the word. He just looked up, met her eyes, and quietly placed his piece forward. She stared at the board, realizing it was over. Completely over. Her voice trembled. You planned this from the start, didn't you?" Diego shook his head slowly. "No, ma'am, you did. The moment you called me boy." The words hit like thunder. And for the first time in her life, Victoria Whitman had nothing to say. For a long moment, no one moved. The sound of that final chess piece settling on the board seemed to echo forever. Mrs. Victoria Whitman, Beverly Hills pride, the woman who once commanded every room, sat frozen, her manicured fingers still hovering above the board like she could somehow undo what had just happened. But she couldn't, because everyone had seen it. Her queen had fallen. Her empire, her ego, had been defeated by a boy she thought didn't belong in her house. Diego sat quietly, not smiling, not celebrating. He simply looked at the board as if he'd just finished a lesson, not a battle. The crowd began whispering. First a few voices, then more, spreading like wildfire through the golden room. Did he really beat her? That kid is incredible. My God! Look at him. Calm as stone. Carmen wiped her eyes with the edge of her apron, tears of disbelief trembling in her lashes. Her son, the boy she once taught to stay silent, had spoken louder than anyone tonight, without even raising his voice. Victoria finally spoke, her voice cold but shaky. Well, this was entertaining, she muttered, forcing a dry laugh that fooled no one. She turned to the guests. I'm glad you all enjoyed our little game, but no one clapped. Not this time. They weren't laughing with her anymore. They were looking at her. Her power, the invisible kind she wore like perfume, had vanished. Diego stood up slowly, pushing his chair back with quiet grace. Thank you for the game, ma'am, he said softly. His voice carried across the marble floor, calm and steady, like dignity itself had learned to speak. Victoria tried to respond, but words tangled in her throat. All she could do was glare, a glare that came from the part of her that couldn't accept losing to someone she didn't consider her equal. As Diego turned to leave, one of the older guests, Mr. Hamilton, the hotel tycoon, spoke up. Son, he said, his deep voice breaking the silence, where did you learn to play like that? Diego paused, looked down for a moment, then said quietly, From life, sir. When the world treats you like a pawn, you learn how to think like a king. The line hit everyone, straight in the gut. Even Victoria's glass slipped from her hand and shattered across the marble, the red wine spreading like spilled pride. Carmen rushed forward, taking her son's hand. They turned toward the door, and as they walked away, not a single person dared to stop them. But before stepping out, Diego glanced back once, not with hatred, but with calm eyes that said everything. The queen had fallen, but it wasn't the board that broke her. It was her own arrogance. By morning, Beverly Hills was buzzing. What happened at Victoria Whitman's mansion wasn't just a dinner. It had turned into a legend overnight. Every guest who'd been there had told someone, and those someones told everyone. It started as whispers in country clubs and business brunches. Did you hear about the maid's son? He destroyed her on her own chessboard. She tried to humiliate him, and he taught her a lesson instead. Within a day, the story had a name. The game that changed the queen. Victoria locked herself in her penthouse that afternoon. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Old friends, reporters, even shareholders, all asking the same question. Is it true? She wanted to scream that it wasn't, that it was blown out of proportion. But deep down, she knew it wasn't exaggerated at all. What hurt wasn't the game itself. It was the silence afterward. The silence that felt like the whole world was finally seeing her. Without the money, the perfume, the image. She poured herself another drink, staring at the shattered chessboard still lying on her table. One white pawn lay on its side, cracked. For the first time, she wondered if that was her. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment across town, Carmen sat with Diego at the small kitchen table. A cheap radio played softly. She held his hand, her eyes full of tears. Not of sadness, but of something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. You shouldn't have done that, she said quietly. Diego smiled faintly. I didn't plan to, Mama. She just gave me a reason, Carmen sighed. You know people like her never forget being embarrassed. Be careful, he nodded. I didn't want to embarrass her. I just wanted her to see me. He paused, eyes distant. To see us. For a second, Carmen saw the boy she used to tuck into bed, dreaming of scholarships and tournaments. But now she saw something more. A young man who refused to bow. Across the city, a local news blog posted a short story titled, Housekeeper's Son Outsmarts Millionaire in Beverly Hills Charity Game. Within hours, it hit 1,000 shares, then 10,000, then more. By evening, clips from the event, secretly recorded by a guest, were circulating online. The internet had found its new symbol of poetic justice. Comments flooded in. The way he said, "The world treats you like a pawn." Chills. That smile at the end. Iconic. This kid just checkmated privilege. Victoria tried to call her PR team. No one picked up. The empire she built on respect and fear was crumbling, not because of a scandal, but because of truth. Carmen watched the clip on her phone that night, tears streaming down her face. Diego sat beside her, quiet, almost embarrassed. "See?" she whispered. "You didn't just play a game, mijo. You reminded people what respect looks like." Diego leaned back, looking at the ceiling. "I just played my move," he said softly. "Now it's the world's turn." And somewhere in the glittering hills, Victoria Whitman realized she was the one being watched now. And for the first time in her life, she couldn't control the board. For the first time in her life, Victoria Whitman didn't want to leave her house. Her reflection in the mirror felt like a stranger. Same diamonds, same perfect hair, but eyes that had lost their certainty. Her phone buzzed again. CNN Los Angeles, requesting comment on last night's incident. She threw it aside. Incident. That's what they called it now. Not a game, not a misunderstanding, but an incident. In one night, her reputation, the image she'd built through charity galas and flawless smiles, had collapsed like a card tower. She opened her social media feed. Her name was everywhere. Clips, headlines, hashtags. The chess boy, Chu, checkmate, in Beverly Hills. Sue, the queen, fell thousands of comments. Some angry, some cheering. But the ones that hit hardest were from people she didn't even know. That boy showed more class in silence than she did in her whole speech. Now she knows what humility looks like. Money can't buy. Respect. She scrolled faster, but there was no escape. Every word was a mirror, and every mirror showed the same truth. Meanwhile, across the city, Diego walked home from school. He didn't wear fancy clothes or carry an expensive backpack. But now people noticed him. Some whispered, some smiled, some even stopped him to shake his hand. "You're the chess boy, right?" one kid asked, eyes wide. Diego smiled shyly. "Yeah, I guess." The boy grinned. "You showed her what's up, man." Diego laughed softly. "Nah, I just played chess." But deep down, he knew it was more than that. When he got home, his mother was watching TV. Another interview. Another debate. This time, they were calling him a symbol of modern America. A headline read, "From the slums to strategy. The boy who checkmated arrogance." Carmen turned off the screen, wiping her eyes. "You've started something, mijo," she whispered. "Something big." Diego sat beside her, quiet. He didn't want fame. He just wanted respect. The kind his mother deserved every day she worked 2 jobs without complaint. That same night, Victoria sat alone at her grand dining table. The same one where it had all happened. The empty chairs around her felt like ghosts. She replayed his words in her mind. "When the world treats you like a pawn, you learn how to think like a king." For the first time, she understood what they meant. She'd spent her whole life being the queen, but she'd never learned how to see the board. Tears she didn't know she still had welled up and spilled over. "God, what have I become?" she whispered. She picked up her phone, hesitated, and then typed a message to the only person she could think of. To Carmen Santos. Message, "Can I speak to your son?" 3 days later, a black car pulled up outside a small apartment complex in East Los Angeles. Neighbors peeked through their curtains. Luxury vehicles didn't stop here. From the car stepped Mrs. Victoria Whitman, the same woman who had humiliated a teenage boy in front of half the city. But tonight there were no diamonds. No makeup, no crowd to impress. Just a pale, shaken woman holding a small wooden box. She hesitated at the building's entrance, adjusting her sunglasses even though it was cloudy. Her driver offered to go with her, but she shook her head. "No, this is something I need to do alone." When Carmen opened the door, her breath caught. "Mrs. Whitman?" she whispered. Victoria managed a small nod. "Please, may I come in?" The room fell silent. Carmen stepped aside hesitantly. Victoria walked in, slowly, like someone entering a church to confess sins. The small apartment smelled of coffee and soap, simple furniture, family pictures, and on one shelf, a single chess trophy, old and dusty. Victoria's eyes lingered on it before she spoke. "Is your son home?" Diego stepped out from his small room. He looked older somehow, not by age but by what life had just taught him. He didn't look angry, just calm, that same calm that had beaten her once before. Victoria took a deep breath. "Diego, I came to apologize." Her voice cracked on the last word. He didn't respond. He just watched her, waiting. "I was cruel," she continued, eyes glassy. "I thought being rich made me better. I thought kindness was weakness." She looked at Carmen. "Your son showed me otherwise. He didn't just beat me in chess. He beat the worst part of me." Carmen's eyes filled with tears. Victoria opened the wooden box she'd been holding. Inside was a small custom-made chess set, carved from marble and ebony. She placed it gently on the table. "I had this made for him," she said softly. "I thought if he ever played again, maybe he'd remember that the board belongs to everyone, not just people like me." Diego looked at the gift, then at her. His voice was quiet but strong. "You don't owe me anything, ma'am." Victoria's eyes shimmered. "I owe you more than I can ever pay." There was silence, thick, emotional, human. Then Diego stepped forward, pulled out a chair, and pointed to the board. "If you really want to say sorry," he said, a small smile breaking through, "play again. But this time, not for pride, for peace." For a moment, Victoria just stared, then smiled, a trembling smile that looked like forgiveness. They sat. The board was ready again. Same pieces, new hearts. As Carmen watched them play, she whispered a prayer of gratitude, not for victory, but for healing. The pieces glimmered under the soft kitchen light. No chandeliers, no cameras, no audience, just three souls sitting around a humble wooden table. For the first time, the board wasn't a battlefield. It was a bridge. Victoria moved first, her hand trembling slightly. "Pawn to e4, she whispered. Her voice no longer carried arrogance. It carried something new, humility. Diego mirrored her move. Pawn to e5. Their eyes met, and for the first time she didn't see a servant's son. She saw a teacher. Carmen watched silently from the corner, her hands pressed together. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Two people who once stood on opposite sides of the world, now sharing the same board. Each move felt different this time. No ego, no anger, just quiet understanding. Two hearts trying to heal the same wound. Midway through the game, Victoria stopped and sighed softly. "You know," she said, eyes glistening, "I spent my whole life thinking the world revolved around people like me. But that night, when you looked at me, I realized how small I was." Diego smiled gently. "The board looks different depending on where you sit, ma'am." Victoria nodded slowly. "And I've been sitting on the wrong side for too long." A tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She let it fall, because for the first time, it felt like truth. The game went on quietly. Then, without noticing, Victoria made a careless move, one that opened her king to danger. Diego hesitated. He could have won again, but he didn't. He looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Let's call it a draw." Victoria blinked, surprised. "You could have beaten me." Diego shook his head. "I wasn't playing to win. I was playing to forgive." Her lips trembled, and for a moment she couldn't breathe, not from sadness but from release. She reached across the table and held his hand. It was the first time she'd ever touched someone like him without feeling superior. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me back something I didn't know I'd lost." Diego nodded. "It wasn't just you who learned something, ma'am." "So did I," she smiled weakly. "And what's that?" "That even kings and queens need to be human sometimes." Weeks later, news outlets tried to revive the old story. Millionaire humbled by chess prodigy. But neither of them cared anymore. The real story had already ended, quietly, beautifully, in a small apartment filled with forgiveness. Victoria started funding the local youth center, anonymously, and every few weeks a sleek black car could be seen parked outside Diego's home. Inside, a woman with gentle eyes would sit across from a young man, and together they'd play chess, not as rich or poor, not as queen or pawn, but as equals. The end moral message. Life is like chess. Everyone starts the same, but it's how you move that defines who you truly are.